What's up? It's Kayla. I'm back after a while of not posting. I'm so sorry. I can't say uploads are gonna get any quicker, but I definitely want to start making more content and doing this kind of stuff because I really do enjoy it. It's just ADHD, depression, all that great stuff. But anyways, I'm here because I want to talk about how, I guess this is going to go with the How to Win Draft League series, but how to build a roster correctly. Maybe I talked about cores and whatnot in the past, but really, how do you build a roster? Let's say you have experience, let's say you've done this kind of thing before, you're really struggling in the playoffs, or you're struggling to, hell, have a good regular season, you had your mojo, but now you're losing, like, that kind of stuff. How do you, what are the next steps? And I'd say, very easily, it's building to your strengths. So this was the first team that I used in a league. I went, or not in a league, but I went 5-7 with this team. I probably should have done better than that, but I had a lot of fun with this team because I felt like Palafin could be very versatile. It's a water type. It can come to every game. It doesn't really need to, I don't really need to think about, oh, how do I game plan this into the game? It is the game plan. So having one mon where I can really game plan around, and then supporting that mon with a wall, 2 walls that really cover its weaknesses. For example, Palafin's weak to ice, or, oh my god, Palafin's not weak to ice. Palafin is weak to electric and grass. I have Hydrapple there for that. And as well as that, supporting the wall with that other. So for example, I was saying with the ice, Hydrapple is weak to ice. It is very commonly weak to ice. Palafin can stop that, and Tinkaton can stop that. What about ground? Hydrapple's there, right? All these common rock, Tinkaton's there. All these common types. It's really about building a core. That's what I liked, is having one mon I could build around, some tanks that really support that one mon, and then filling any other archetype I need. For example, a ground type that can really take a hit, set up rocks, spin, another water I like having 2 water types, one of which is physically and the other special, or one's offensive, the other's defensive. I like that because I think water's the best type in the game, and I don't think it's really close. So I think getting as much water types as you can is probably, or not as much as you can, but getting 2 water types I think is usually what I like to do. I like having a normal type, or really any kind of mon that can really get a lot of, not just hazards, but utility. For example, the Dun has Glare, it has Body Slam, look at the coverage this thing has, it can even get out with Baton Pass, and it can just do a lot of stuff, right? I like that. I like having a poison type. I really like having as many options as I can, right? But specifically, I really like having an offensive water type. I also really like having an offensive fighting and an offensive fire type. I know Espeon's not fire, but predominantly in this league, I use Espeon as a Terra Fire. So those are 2 things that I really, or really 3 things I really like. Defensively, I really like a flying type or an electric type, or some combination of that. Rotom Fanta is a mon that I've just fell in love with, as well as the dark poison type as a whole. Muckalola is probably one of my favorite mons to use in draft leagues just because of how versatile it is. And I've been in this league, I think, for 3 or 4 seasons. I think 3 seasons. Every single season I've used a dark poison type. Like, that is just my MO for that, right? But then, I've said it in the past, I think Dark Fighting Psychic is my favorite core. I'm kind of falling off a bit with it, but I think offensively can really open things up, especially if your main mon is not that type. I feel like having a core you can have in the back is really nice. And as my leagues went on, I honed this idea of, let's get a sweeper, let's get a guy we can base, again, Palafin, I just love Palafin. It's becoming one of my favorite mons in Draft League. And then surrounding it with 2 really defensive Pokemon that can take away its weaknesses, one of which can up hazards and whatnot, and the other can put in its own work, right? Similar to Hydrapple, it can run AV sets, it can even run Bex sets, it can do whatever it wants. And then surrounding it, again, with another Fighting Psychic and Dark Core that can be offensive. In this case, it can also be defensive, and I think that's why this team succeeded. I only lost, I think, 2 games with this team, unfortunately. One of those games was in the playoffs, and I think it was the 2nd round. But still, it was really impressive considering, if you don't know where I've been at as a draft league player, I've been struggling this past year and a half or so, 2 years. Since I won in UBDL, I was still doing well, and then eventually the wheels fell off and I lost my identity as a player. But over this past year, I've really found it again. I've really been looking more to the mons that I used already as opposed to mons that I haven't used to find that familiarity. And Raging Bull is not a mon I've ever used before, but because it fit what my team was going for at the time, and it was also available, and it's a Raging Bull, and I have Palafin Terapagos, it was kind of easy to just slap onto the team, right? Aptos Galar is not a mon I've used, but I've used a very similar archetype of a fighting type that can just do a lot of damage. I can run Scarf, I can run Bandit, look at this insane attack stat, right? Having a fairy that can be utility based, right? You're seeing a lot of patterns starting to form just based on these past two teams. Let's go to the third team, right? Or I also forgot to mention, not really an offensive fire type in this case because of Crocolore, but not all things translate from one team to another. It's just what do you notice as similarities between many teams. What is your special attacker? What is your offensive physical attacker? What types are you predominantly using? How are you winning your games? Are you knocking off a ton? Are you playing stally offense? Are you playing with webs or hazards, or how are you playing your games? That also has to be in consideration, right? And with these teams, I found that, hey, I was primarily setting up an endgame for one or two Pokemon that I thought could sweep, right? That was how I was doing things. So I centered my teams around that, especially after these 3 leagues. It was very apparent to me of what I was doing. And this team is a little bit of an exception of that, but this team is like, you take everything and then you just apply it to this random thing. That's kind of what I did with that team. But moving on to this team, again, offensive fire type. I think Heatran finished with like 8 kills or something. Heatran has never been that guy for me, and he just showed up in like a crazy way. Latios was amazing. Again, I guess this isn't the greatest example because I literally built this team from a Fairy Dragon Silcore and went from there, but if Heatran is my #1 guy, my Fighting Psychic Dark Core is Latios, Samurai, and Flamigo. And again, fighting flying type. You can see the patterns, like a fairy type that can do whatever you need it to, and it can be utility. That's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Heatran's weak to ground, it's weak to water. I have Sinistcha. Fable's weak to steel and poison. I have Heatran. All of these things go together to build this one team, and this team in particular did very well. I lost again, I think 2 games, one of which in the regular season and the other, I think, second round of the playoffs. I forget, honestly, between these 2 leagues. I think they were very similar though in that case, or maybe I lost 3 games in this one out of 11. My teams are starting to form very, very similar, coherent things, and you see from league to league, there are mons that are transferring over, right? Like Palafin was in both of these leagues. Well, there is another team, but honestly, I got about it, and also I only played like 4 games with it, or 5 games with it, so I don't really bring that one as an example, but that one also had a lot of carryover between these teams, right? Ground types, look at the ground types. They're all very, like, that is what you need to start looking for in your teams that succeeded versus the teams you didn't. I feel like I'm repeating myself a ton, but how you played with them, what mons you really liked, what mons were very reliable. You have to look for that and find the patterns within them. And if you're wondering about sample size, what do you need? I'd say I would say, because one is a fluke, one is a data point, 1 instance, 2 is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. So usually I try to go for about 5. 5 is pretty substantial to me because yes, 3 is a pattern, but I don't know, 3 is a very fluky number. I like 5, it's a very even, well, it's literally odd, but it's a very good benchmark in my opinion. In my voice. So moving on, we have this UBDL team. Again, this team did very well. That is the trend with pretty much all of these teams except for this first team, but I had a lot of fun playing with it, and that is probably the most important part, is if you have a lot of fun playing it, you're gonna want to keep playing, and you're gonna want to keep getting better with that. So that's why that was kind of my first, even though it didn't do well, I really liked a lot of aspects of it. So, this team. This team is really interesting because I feel like it broke a lot of the trends, but it also reinforced a lot of the trends. It's kind of weird, but offensive fire type that puts in a lot of work. Ho-Oh was the #1 kill leader on my team, even though it only played 4 games or so before playoffs. I put in a lot of work. Same, Chien-Pao is just one of my favorite mons, and it doesn't really... It kind of breaks a lot of rules, but again, you see the Dark Psychic Fighting, which is a very constant core with my teams that I can rely upon. And usually my #1 doesn't fill that core so that I can use it in the back. Like I said, this is kind of weird because Ho-Oh is such an interesting Pokemon that I can play these defensive, but I can also play these offensive roles. And like I already said, Ho-Oh was my offensive kill leader, but defensively, it's also not weak to ground, it's not weak to fighting, it's not weak to fire, right? And look at the 2 mons that it can support very well, right? That's kind of, and even Primarina to an extent, right? Not weak to steel, resist to fighting, resist to fire, resist to, what else, bug. There's just a lot of through lines with just building. Even in this case, I felt this team was a little clunky, but I think that's because I had 2 Pokemon I could really support under this, and I felt like I had to pick and choose between who did better and who didn't. Spoiler alert, Chien-Pao's really good, and while Terra Kartana's awesome and one of my favorite mons, if Chien-Pao was something else, I think Kartana would have gotten a lot more love than it did. But again, this team follows so many different things, right? You have a rocker who can do utility, you have a ground type, bulky ground type that can do really good stuff. Another through line now with this is a bulky grass type. Bulky grass types have been scattered throughout this, right? We have Sinistcha over here. I'd even throw in Thwackey. I was using it as a pivot with Eviolite that can set up grassy terrain and weaken ground type moves and boost up, but just take away some shit, right? Darina, Hydrapple, right? And this one, this is, again, as I keep saying, there are always exceptions, but there's the exceptions usually are because the team follows so many of the other rules that I feel like I can break that exception. But team did very well. Again, I won a playoff game, lost the next one. I think I finished 5-2 or I don't, or 6-2, I don't remember. But then this league, which just concluded about 3 weeks ago, was again a very, very similar team where you have an offensive special water type that this was Terra, so can literally Terra into anything, and I was like, okay, I'm going to build around this mon. What is Inteleon usually weak to? It's weak to electric, it's weak to grass, it's just very feral in general. So you pair it up with something that resists both of those. On top of that, it's not weak to ice, which kind of makes this core just a little bit better because I think ice is a very common offensive Terra type. So that was kind of what I was also looking at with Gouging Fire. But I also think they both complement each other well because this is, while yes, it is bulky, it's again a very offensive Pokemon. So it can fill that role that I need. Let's get the other cores. Right? Let's get the Fairy Dragon Steel core that's usually, you guys have been seeing. That's usually the first core I go to, or I go to Fire, Water, Grass, but because of Inteleon, I couldn't really figure that one out. But also, I'm tangenting a lot, I'm sorry, I'm on adderall right now. You can also see that a lot of my cores, a lot of the first mons will lead into a second core, right? Besides really this one, every other one, water type feeds into fire, water, grass. Water type, or this was the exception, fire type leads into water, fire, water, grass. Fire type leads into grass, water. Right? I'm still getting the major cores that I need, but I'm usually involving the star of the show, ironically in a fire, water, grass core, but if you want to argue Gouging Fire was the star, which it did have a really good game where it popped off, but Inteleon was really the star. But if you want to argue Gouging Fire is the star, well, it's also sharing the fire type, so it can also do that as well. That is what I've been loving about these teams, is that I've repeated myself, I don't need to repeat it again, but you see a lot of through lines, defensive ground type that can get up hazards, utility. This is really the offensive fighting. It couldn't Terra, but Hitmontop was just the spinner of my team, and it can, I don't know, do things in a pinch. It was a very weird mon to use, but I used it more defensively than offensively, so Braviary became really the bulky offensive mon, same with Gouging. Metagross was a really good tank, steel type tank, that is also becoming a very through line besides this team. But Heatran, steel type tank, I used Jirachi as a tank, and I used Tigaton as a tank. So all of those through lines are coming together to make what I like. And because I like what I like, it makes me want to use teams like this more. It makes me want to play more draft leagues, and it makes me want to continue to make teams very similar to this. And sure, in the beginning, I didn't really have the success I wanted, right? I went 5-7, but I enjoyed playing Mons. That is the big reason why I'm in a lot less leagues, but I'm having a lot more fun, maybe because of the stress, but also because I'm having fun building and I'm having fun playing, win or loss. And I think that's just huge. You need to really be looking for enjoyment first in Draft League and success later, if you want to play for a while at least, because that is how you're gonna adapt. That's how you're gonna get better at Draft League, is finding what you like and not using what you dislike. That completely changed the game for me. So those are my tips. That I know a lot of it was kind of self-centered, but I feel like it's a lot easier for me to show you guys what I'm doing, and you guys can pick up the pieces from there. So I hope that all made sense. I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll have more content out. I'm not in too many leagues right. I'm literally only in one league right now, but I want to do more Draft League. I want to keep doing this because, believe it or not, I actually really like Draft League. What? No, crazy. But I also want to practice my voice, which I'm not doing right now, but that's fine. But I had a lot of fun with this. It kind of just hit me as an idea, and I figured, fuck it, why not let it fly. But hope you enjoyed. Have a great one, and peace out. I bet you didn't expect the peace out. What the Sigma?